book lovers, and welcome back or welcome to Nat Cat's Bookish Cafe. Today I am here to go through my mid-month wrap-up for the month of June. Alright, so it is June 17th, so just a little bit over the halfway point. So I will be going through all the books that I have read up to this point, as well as discussing some of my plans for the second half of this month. There is one of my neighbors mowing their lawn right now. It seems like it's kind of far off. It's enough for me to hear it, but I'm hoping that maybe my phone doesn't pick it up. So I apologize if you can hear that, but I do need the window open just to get that fresh air because I'm gonna be here for a little while. One of the reasons that I decided to do mid-month wrap-ups is so that my end of the month wrap-up isn't so long. I used to read probably between 10 to 13 books a month, and I just felt like the wrap-ups were getting a little bit too long for my liking, and unfortunately this month it's going to be relatively long as well. I have been taking part in a readathon, the Ancient Wonders readathon, hosted by Liz at Liz's Literary Life, and because of that it's a competition. So I've been reading more than usual. I have read 13 books so far, which is usually the amount of books I would have read by the end of the month, not this halfway point. So that does mean that I'm going to be pretty quick about my reviews on these books. I have vlogged my experience. In fact, week one's vlog should already be out. So if you want additional information, you can check that out. And week two vlog will be coming out on Friday. So you'll get more information on those books as well at that time. So this will be a little spoiler, I guess, for that vlog, for my thoughts on the books that I read during it, but that's okay. All right, then, without further ado, I will go ahead and jump into my reviews. So the first book I finished this month was an audiobook, and that is The Kind Worth Killing by Ted Swanson. This is a thriller story that I have heard a lot of good things about, so I decided to go ahead and check it out. We are following Ted, who is at the airport bar waiting for a delayed flight, where he meets Lily, and they decide to strike up a conversation and share a drink, and he starts discussing the issues that he's having with his wife because his wife is cheating on him. He makes a comment stating that he wishes he could kill his wife, and Lily suggests that they go through with it. So this book follows multiple points of view. I would say the main one are Lily, Ted, and Ted's wife, who I believe is called Miranda, something with an M. So we're following their 3 points of view throughout this story. I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. I thought that it was an interesting thriller for sure. I did enjoy the female perspectives more than Ted's. So his perspective is kind of what dragged the story down for me. I thought that the female perspectives gave me a little bit of They Never Learn vibes. If you know the book that I'm talking about, I can't remember the name of that author, because Lily does work at a university, and some of the flashbacks to her past also take place during college. This book does take some unexpected turns throughout the story, which is why I'm keeping this relatively vague, but I will say that one of the strongest points of the book for me was the ending, and when it comes to thrillers, I always put a lot of stock into the ending when it comes to my ratings. So I would say the majority of the book kind of sat at a 3-star, and that ending did bump it up to a 3.5 for me. The next book I finished, and the first book that I read for the readathon and is present in my vlog, The Kind Worth Killing you won't find in those vlogs, and that is Blood Debts by Terry Benton Walker. And this is actually the book that I replaced The Wolf and the Woodsman. I kind of made a comment about it in the description of my June TBR, and I think a lot of people miss that because they're probably like me and don't read the descriptions. But I did end up reading this instead of The Wolf and the Woodsman because this has queer representation, and it being June, I wanted to go ahead and make sure I was reading as many queer books as possible. So this is the first in a series, which I didn't know, and when I finished it, I was very disappointed because I'm very excited for the next one, but I believe that's not coming out until April of next year. But in this book, we are following a pair of twins, and their name is Chris and Clement, and they are witches living in New Orleans. In this story, they are members of a family that used to be considered kind of royalty among the witches in New Orleans, but their grandmother was accused of killing a white woman, and she and her husband were killed or lynched by a white mob, and another family took over. At the beginning of this book, the twins find out that someone has attempted to kill their mother, and so they start hunting for the culprit who is trying to bring down their family again. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. The reason that it's not higher is because I struggled a little bit with the beginning. This book has a ton of drama between different people, between family members, between different witch families, between political groups. There's just everyone is going at everybody's throat. And in the beginning, it was just a little bit too chaotic. I just wish we had a little bit more time to settle into the story and get to know our characters. But towards the end, I really think that the author started focusing more on specific plot points, so it was a little bit less all over the place, and I really did enjoy the drama aspect of it. I do enjoy some good family drama. I do love some good revenge. I really did enjoy both of our characters, Chris and Clement. They went through a lot of changes throughout the story, and I'm really interested to see the kind of people they are in book 2. There's a lot of twists, and definitely the ending opened up the door for some very interesting things to happen in the next book, and so I am definitely going to check that out when it comes out. Next, I finished my first physical book of the month, and that is The Hacienda by Isabella Canos, and this is kind of a retelling of Rebecca taking place after the Mexican War of Independence. We are following 2 points of view. One of them is Beatrice, and her father was killed as a traitor after the War of Independence ended, and she and her mother have been living with family members who look down on their family because her mother ended up marrying someone below her station. So Beatrice, when given the opportunity to marry a wealthy man named Rodolfo, takes this opportunity to kind of save herself and her mother and goes to move into his hacienda out in the countryside. Her mother refuses to join her, so Beatrice sets out to try and kind of liven up this hacienda. The hacienda is very beautiful. The family is very wealthy, but for some reason it looks like people have just kind of been letting the house crumble, and so she wants to fix it up so it's a place that her mother wants to live. That, however, is not something that the house is interested in whatsoever. As soon as Beatrice walks through the front doors, she can feel that there is something wrong. So after her husband leaves back to the capital, she calls upon Andreas and one of the other priests in hopes of exorcising this house. The other priest is not at all interested in this, saying that there's nothing wrong in the house. However, luckily for her, Andreas, our other point of view, also happens to be a witch who grew up in this home and is set on saving the house from the angry spirit that resides within. This is a haunted house story. This is not, oh, there's some sort of other explanation for what's going on. There is a paranormal aspect to this story. I ended up giving the story only 3.5 stars. I had a good time with the story, but considering that it was a haunted house story and our character was feeling a lot of fear for her life, and her life was very much threatened, I was not getting those vibes. I myself was not feeling creeped out. I was not feeling spooked in any way. Another reason I gave it a lower rating is just because it took me a while to get in to Beatrice's character, and I feel like it was supposed to be that way. Beatrice in the beginning is very much trying to be kind of who you would expect the high lady of a house to be, and that's not the most likable person, especially when you see the way that she treats the servants, but eventually she starts to become a better person. And then I do like her. She's definitely a strong female lead, which we always enjoy in a story. But I think for me, what really saved this book was Andreas. I think he was such an interesting character. I think a lot of people call him the sexy priest, and I agree. I really love the fact that he was a witch, and not just kind of the witch that is familiar in this area. His father, I believe, was from Spain, and so he had a darker witchcraft within him as well from his father's side of the family that he was often trying to hold back. However, that darkness is the one thing that could save them from this house. So I really enjoyed him just kind of dealing with his witchcraft, as well as his connection to this house, the servants there, and the land around it. So I really think that he brought a lot to the story, and I was very satisfied with the ending of this book as well. The next book I finished was another audiobook, and that was A Deeper Waters by F.T. Lukens. And this is a queer YA story. It's kind of historical fantasy. We are following Prince Tal, and he is going on his kind of coming of age journey where he sets out from the palace to explore the kingdom after he turns 16. So this is a slightly younger YA story, and I think that was one of the reasons I rated it slightly lower. I ended up giving this a 3.5 star, which is still a good rating. Anything I rate 3.5 I would recommend. But while he is on his journey, on the first day, they come across a ship that has burned down because it got trapped in a storm. And on this boat, they find a young man called Athlin, and he seems to be chained up in there. So they go ahead and bring him onto their ship, where Athlin discovers that Tal actually has magic. Tal tries to hide his magic because the last person that had magic, I believe, was his grandfather, and his grandfather actually used his magic to conquer a lot of land, which made him very much a villain figure. And so his family does not want the other kingdoms to know that he has magic because they're worried that that'll cause another war, or that they will request that they kill Tal to prevent him, becoming evil like his grandfather. However, Athlin is not at all scared of Tal's magic, and in fact kind of uses it to trick Tal into freeing him so that he can jump over the side of the ship, which Tal is very upset about because he thinks Athlin is now dead, and that it's his fault. However, when they get to port, he finds that Athlin is there in the market, very much alive. The two become friends throughout this story and actually set out on a journey together after Tal is kidnapped by an enemy kingdom. That kingdom is hoping that Tal will reveal that he does in fact have magic so that they can use it as an excuse to go to war. Tal and Athlin are able to escape the situation and are trying to journey home so that Tal can warn his family about this kingdom's evil plans. So as far as books go, it is relatively simplistic. This doesn't have any complex world building or any overly complex political scheming or anything. 3.5 stars for it just being a good time. I thought that this book was very cute. I thought the romance was very sweet. I really liked the family aspect of it. Tal has a ton of siblings, and so I really enjoyed their relationships. But you know, it was very much a book with a lot of plot conveniences. I like to say, you know, you show up at an inn in the middle of nowhere and the villain just happens to be there discussing their evil plans for you to like overhear. That's the kind of situations you come across in this book. So if that's something you don't like because you're just like, oh, this is boring, probably don't pick this up. But if you're looking for just a fun, easy read, I definitely think this is worth checking out because it made me smile, and sometimes you just gotta read a book that makes you smile. All right, next we finished another audiobook, and this was called A Sweet Mess by J.C. Lee. And this is a contemporary romance set in a small town, and we are following our character Aubrey. I was reading another book with a character named Audrey in it, so I am always, if I mess up and call her Audrey, Aubrey, whatever her name is, I apologize. Anyway, Aubrey lives in the small town and owns a bakery there where she sells to the locals as well as online orders. One day, a food critic, a well-respected food critic called Landon, stops by unexpectedly. She doesn't know that he showed up or anything. He happened to get a flat tire outside of their town on the way to a Michelin star restaurant and decides to pick up a chocolate bundt cake and is accidentally given a special order which was made for a 6-year-old, which causes him to almost choke to death on an unexpected gummy worm. He doesn't plan on writing a review on this place because he only tried one thing. However, his editor says that he needs something to print in the next couple of hours because another story fell through. So he decides to write a kind of scathing review about the cockiness of this baker to bake such a monstrosity and not warn their customers about it, even though that is not at all the situation. And he later does figure that out. However, he and Aubrey actually had a one-night stand, and therefore he feels he can't retract it because if anyone else finds out about that, both he and Aubrey will lose any credibility. So instead, he propositions Aubrey to join his friend on a cooking show where she can amaze the judges with her incredible baking skills, and it will kind of override his scathing review because her business is now struggling because all of those outside orders are no longer coming in, and the locals themselves, while still supporting the business because they know, you know, the situation, it's just not enough to keep the bakery afloat. So Aubrey does agree to this, and since he is acting as partial producer, I believe, they are spending a lot of time together. In fact, they're living in the same house right now, so there is some forced proximity. I wouldn't go so far as to call this enemies to lovers. Aubrey is understandably very angry at Landon for this whole situation, but she is still incredibly attracted to him from the very beginning, and so the two of them definitely are doing a lot of flirting, and there's a lot of sexual tension from the very beginning. I ended up giving this story 3.5 stars. I thought it was a really sweet romance. I really liked the setting. It was set both in her small town as well as in kind of an area where there's a lot of vineyards, which is where the cooking show is being set. So it made it a very cute vibe, and I did like the romance between the two of them. I just feel like this wasn't anything overly special, anything overly memorable. I will say, and I mentioned this in the vlog, I kind of give this as just like a warning. And I feel kind of bad saying, warning, warning, this is a terrible thing to happen. I don't mean that. I just know that this is a trope that some people, you know, desperately try to avoid because it just kind of turns them off from a romance. And that is that there is a surprise pregnancy in this book. That didn't lower my rating at all. I mean, I'm not a big pregnancy fan or anything, but I didn't think it took away from the story, and if anything, I think it added to the story, especially when it came time for our love interest Landon to go and grovel for Aubrey to take him back. So some good things, just nothing overly special about this, which is why it's just getting a 3.5 star for me. The next audiobook I finished was Thanks a Lot Universe by Chad Lucas, and this is a middle grade story. We're following 2 points of view in the story. The first one is Brian, and Brian on his birthday finds out that his father has had to flee due to the police being after him, and because his father has up and left the family, his mother attempts suicide. So definitely some trigger warnings in this story, especially at the beginning. So because his mother needs to spend some time in the hospital, he is placed into foster care with his younger brother. Brian suffers from anxiety, and this whole situation causes that anxiety to escalate into panic attacks. In hopes of keeping the situation under control and keeping his brother safe, Brian decides to run away from the foster home to a hotel and eventually a cabin in the woods. On the other hand, we are following Ezra, and Ezra is on Brian's basketball team. He is, unlike Brian, very social, kind of the guy that's friends with everyone, yet he has been realizing that some of his friends are acting a bit differently and they seem to be growing apart. The boys in the story are about 13 years old, so they're coming to that age where they start talking about like girls and things, and Ezra just feels like he can't connect to that because he is gay and is struggling to come out to his friends because of that. Ezra actually has a crush on Brian, and so when he finds out that Brian has run away and that he may be able to help, he jumps on the opportunity to do so. I ended up giving this story a 3.5. I will say it's a high 3.5, and probably the reason it just didn't hit harder is because it's a middle grade and I am not the audience for it, but I would say as far as middle grades go, this is definitely one worth checking out. It's really great when it comes to mental health representation, as well as discussing the importance of having a good support system. We see both Brian and Ezra start to thrive a lot more as they find people to support them in their individual situations. I really enjoyed both of the characters as well as their friendship and their friendship with those around them. So I would definitely say that this is a book that's worth checking out, especially if you're looking for books that handle mental health representation really well as kind of the steps for coming out to friends, directed specifically at a younger audience. All right, guys, we're halfway there now. We're going as fast as we can. I just babble too much. But the next book I finished is another physical book, and that is Capturing the Devil by Carrie Maniscalco. This is the 4th and final book in the Stalking Jack the Ripper series, and I ended up giving this 4 stars. In the series, we are following Audrey Rose and Thomas Creswell as they apprentice with Audrey's uncle to become forensic scientists. This is a historical mystery series, and being in a historical setting, people very much look down on Audrey? Once again, I'm messing it up because of that other book, Audrey, for wanting to take on such an unladylike profession. However, she is incredibly passionate about what she does, as well as very talented at it. I absolutely love the characters in this story. I really enjoyed the mystery aspects of the first 3 books. We follow Jack the Ripper, and then Dracula, and then Houdini. In this book, we are now in America following a killer at the Chicago World Fair. This book, I did not like the mystery as much. I'm not saying I hated it or anything, but the first good chunk of this book really doesn't focus on the mystery as much. This series does have a romance aspect to it between Thomas and Audrey, which I really enjoy. And so I'm not too upset that the first chunk of this book focuses primarily on their relationship. However, that does mean that when it did come to solving the mystery, it all felt a little bit rushed towards the end. And also, unfortunately, our villain gave a monologue, you know, one of those villainous monologues, that I was just like, can you finish it up? Can you guys fight? Can one of you die? Something, anything. So that aspect of the story I didn't really love. However, I still gave it 4 stars because I really enjoyed the writing, the characters, the relationship, as well as the way that the author decided to wrap up the series. So a series completed, always a success. And I will be definitely checking out other work by this author. All right, and the next book that I'm going to talk about is another physical book, and actually my only 5-star that I've given out so far this month. You may have noticed there was a ton of 3.5 stars. Luckily, moving forward, no more 3.5 stars, mostly 4 stars. But this one is a 5-star read. Excellent story. Definitely should check it out if you haven't already. And that is Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ning. This is a historical story that is set in America in the 1970s, following a Chinese American family. At the beginning of this story, the family finds out that the middle child, Lydia, was found dead in the lake. Lydia was kind of considered the favorite child of the parents. She is a child where the mother put her dreams of becoming a doctor on, and the father put the dreams of fitting in and having lots of friends on. So pretty much all her parents' hopes and dreams were put onto this one child, while the other children were either seen as a slight disappointment, if not outright almost ignored. This obviously makes one wonder if Lydia decided to take her own life or if something more sinister happened. So throughout the story, we are getting both the family's life before Lydia died. So we are getting Lydia's perspective to kind of see her opinion of being the golden child. We're also getting her siblings' opinions, her mom, her dad, and then we're also seeing their lives after her death as well. This story, it's kind of hard to describe how I feel about it. It was kind of the story where I almost wish I could have just binge read the entire thing in one setting. It was so easy to get lost in this family's life, in their grief, in their hopes, in their dreams, in their trauma. It was just so addictive and so well written. It's a relatively short story, yet you really feel like you know these characters, and by the end you find yourself really rooting for this family to come together and just kind of move on and learn from this traumatic event that happened. I will say that the ending of this book broke my heart. And it did cause me to shed some tears. I didn't outright sob the way that I did with like the death of Vivek Oji, but I definitely felt the grief very deep in my chest. The author did a really great job of building up Lydia as a character. So when you do learn what happened to her and the choices that she made, that you feel that. You feel that you feel is how, you know, she may have felt in that moment, and you feel the grief that her parents and her siblings felt as well. So this is definitely a book that I suggest checking out. It is a more difficult read because of the death aspect of it. So definitely make sure that mental health wise you are doing okay. But I definitely think this is one of those must read books for sure. Great character study for sure. Next, we have another audiobook called She Drives Me Crazy by Kelly Quinlan. And this is actually my lowest rated book of the month so far. I gave it 3 stars. And I honestly don't have much to say on it. So this book follows 2 high schoolers. I believe they're seniors, though while I was reading it, they all felt a bit younger, to be honest, which is one of the reasons I didn't love the story. But we're following Scotty, who is on the basketball team, and Irene, who is the head cheerleader. They live in a small town and their basketball is kind of ignored, like nobody cares about basketball. And one day after a game, Irene ends up hitting Scotty with her car. And when their parents show up to exchange like insurance information, the 2 of them, not wanting to cause drama, kind of pretend to know each other, even though they're kind of like enemies at school due to a stunt that Irene pulled the previous year with getting Scotty's car towed. The mothers are like, great idea, why don't you guys carpool until Irene's car is repaired. So reluctantly, the 2 of them decide to do that. And Scotty notices that when Irene comes to sit at their practice waiting for Scotty to get off so that they can drive home together, that a lot of people follow her and start rooting for the basketball team while they're waiting, and that the basketball team is doing a lot better because of this. She also notices that her girlfriend, who transferred to another school and broke up with her, reaches out to her when she sees that she's hanging out with Irene to see if like they're hanging out or what's going on. She seems to be jealous, and so Scotty makes a plan with Irene to a fake date to help the basketball team and to make her ex-girlfriend jealous. I just didn't super vibe with Scotty. I think based off of the cover, I was expecting a certain personality from her. And I feel really bad saying this, but I thought she was kind of a wimpy character. And I really liked Irene. She was a pretty strong character, someone who stood up for herself a lot. And so in comparison, Scotty just couldn't hold a candle to her. And so I felt like she didn't really deserve Irene. And as far as the remainder of the story goes, there just wasn't much going on that I cared about, which is why I just gave it a 3 stars. It's nothing that I hated, but it's not, you know, something that I'm overly crazy about either. The next audiobook that I finished was Love and Other Disasters by Anita Kelly, and this is a adult queer romance that is set on a cooking competition TV series. In this book, we are following Dahlia, and she is kind of feeling very stuck, like a bit of a failure in life. I believe she's about 26, 27, and she has recently been divorced and is kind of at a job that doesn't like pay a lot and doesn't make her feel overly successful, and she has been handling this stress by learning how to cook. And so she decides to go on to this amateur cooking competition show, and there she meets London. London is there because they and their twin got drunk one night and they signed up for it, and they decided to just kind of roll with it. There is a prize, a money prize, and they are hoping to use that money to create kind of like a camp or a community center that can be a safe space for queer children. I ended up giving this story 4 stars. I thought it was very sweet and very sexy. I really loved Dahlia as a character. She was very bubbly. She was very quirky, almost on the side of like ditzy, but not like in a negative way. I don't mean that as a negative. I really did think that she was a very entertaining character to listen to. I could kind of see her being a character that some people are annoyed by, but she didn't annoy me at all. I had a lot of fun with her. I also really enjoyed London. I thought they were very steady, kind of a calming presence almost, and I also thought that they were a very sexy character. I was very attracted to them. So the romance between them two was pretty hot. I also enjoyed the competition aspect of it, the cooking aspect of it. I almost would have liked a little bit more of that, in fact, a little bit more food references and whatnot. I did enjoy the mental health aspects of it. Dahlia was dealing with a lot of insecurities throughout this story that stemmed a lot from her wanting to gain approval from her mother, and London was dealing with some issues as well, in that they came out as non-binary to their family, I think about like 3 years ago, and their father is still treating it very much as a phase, though luckily the rest of their family is very supportive of their existence. Don't know how else to put that. But yeah, overall, I thought it was a really great story. Really enjoyed the writing and the smut, so I will be checking out other work by this author. The next audiobook that I finished was The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Nevo. And this is an audiobook that's only about like 2.5 hours, so we're gonna be like really vague here. Pretty much we are following, I believe they're like a cleric that comes from an abbey, and they are someone who documents events for archival reasons, I'm assuming, and they were on their way to view a eclipse that is happening in an area of the kingdom. However, the empire has opened up certain areas of the kingdom that was previously off limits, including the land where the previous Empress of Salt and Fortune had been exiled after she provided the emperor with an heir. When our cleric arrives at this manor, they find an old woman called Rabbit, who used to be a servant, a very close servant of this empress during her exile. So they start kind of exploring this house and looking through some of the items that are there, and while they're looking at these, Rabbit is telling them about their time with the Empress and how she went from being in exile to ruling the country. I ended up giving this story 4 stars. It was a very short story, which usually isn't really my thing. However, I thought that the author was able to fit in a very interesting and well fleshed out story within such a short time frame. I really was intrigued by all the characters, as well as enjoyed the writing as well. So I thought it deserved a 4-star. It was entertaining, and I will definitely be checking out the rest of the series because I enjoyed the author's storytelling style. All right, and we're on the second to last book, just in time because I think my dad just started mowing the lawn right here, so I apologize if you can hear that, but we're almost done here. So the next book that I started and finished was a physical book, my last physical book as of now, and that is Warriors Into the Wild by Aaron Hunter. This is part of my reread goal, to reread this entire The Prophecies Begin. So the Warriors series I think has like 4 or 5 series within it, and I'm just planning on reading the first one, which is a total of 6 books. So I wanted to start it here in June so I can read about 1 book a month, and make sure I finish it by the end of the year. This pretty much follows 4 cat clans, specifically the Thunder Clan. We are following Firepaw, who was a house cat but ends up joining the Thunder Clan because they are running low on warriors due to battles with the other clans. There, he learns how to become a warrior for this clan and how to hunt and fight other cats, and kind of helps them to not be taken over by the Shadow Clan. The Shadow Clan is looking to take over more territory because they don't lose as many kittens during the winter. A lot of the other clans lose a lot of their kittens due to the cold and hunger during those times, but the Shadow Clan seems to be able to keep their kittens alive more, and so they have more mouths to feed and are looking to take food away from the other clans to feed them. I ended up giving this 4 stars. It is definitely a kid's book, but I was really pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed the story. I thought that plot-wise it was really well done. It wasn't like overly simplistic despite being a children's book, and I really enjoyed all the different characters as well as some of the what we might consider political intrigue that was going on. There was definitely some corruption happening in here. There is quite a bit of like fighting and even death, which, considering it is a kid's book, you may want to just make sure that before your kid reads this that they're okay with watching cats die, because watching animals die is always a little bit difficult. But I was pleasantly surprised by this book. I had a lot of fun. I liked our main character, and so I gave it 4 stars and am excited to move forward with the series. And the last book, hoopla, is Untethered Sky by Fonda Lee. And this was a relatively short audiobook as well. I think it was like exactly 4 hours long. So once again, going to be relatively vague. So in this book, we are following a young woman who watches her brother and mother get killed by a manticore. Manticores are these creatures that humans cannot kill because of their protective armor, and they are definitely causing a bit of havoc within the kingdom because their primary prey is humans. Because of this terrible encounter with the manticore, she decides to become a rooker, I believe they're called. Rookers are people who train to handle rocks, and these are pretty much, I think we would consider them like giant eagles or hawks, and they are the only creatures that are natural predators to the manticores. So she connects with a rock, and the two of them set out for them to learn how to hunt together and to take down the manticore. Now, this is not some sort of lovey-dovey relationship like someone may have with their dog or something. These are deadly creatures, and a lot of people that train to become rookers actually end up dying because these creatures will just like tear out your innards, because they are, at the end of the day, still wild animals. So this book very much focuses on kind of the difficulty of taming, and not just initially taming it, but holding on to it, something that is not really meant to be contained. I ended up giving this story 4 stars. At the beginning, I have to admit, I just didn't care that much, but Fonda Lee, she just knows how to write. I don't know what to say. I mean, her world building in the Greenbone Saga was incredible, and that was a series that has over 1,000 pages in it, and this book, she managed to do an incredible amount of world building as well, despite just being a short 4-hour audiobook. I think the book itself is maybe like less than 200 pages, so it was definitely very impressive. I think one of the reasons I just had trouble loving the story is because I didn't absolutely love our character, and even in the Greenbone Saga, loving Fonda Lee's character is a bit of a struggle. They're not always the most likable and that's the case in this book as well. But I think it was definitely a really interesting concept, and that Fonda Lee did a really good job exploring that. And once again, this had an ending that I was very satisfied with. All right, guys, let's quickly go through the books I'm currently working on, as well as the ones I still need to get to. Audiobook wise, I'm currently working on Vicious Spirits by Kat Cho. I'm 17% through this. Not loving it right now, but we'll see if I can finish it by the end of the weekend for the readathon. But this is the second book to Wicked Fox, and I'm not really going to talk about what these are about because I'll do that at my wrap up at the end of the month. As far as my physical read, the book I'm reading is on my Kindle, and that is The Emperor of Evening Stars by Laura Thalassis. This is technically the third book in the Bargainer series. However, it is a novella as well as a prequel where we are just following Desmond, and that also I'm not absolutely loving, but when it comes to the Bargainer series, I definitely enjoy Calypso a lot more than her mate Desmond. So it just being about him, don't care that much, to be honest, but we're reading it because it's part of the series. So hopefully that as well I finish by the end of this weekend. All right, I hope the angle didn't change too much. My phone told me that storage was full, so I had to go in and delete my deleted photos. I always hate when it does that. I'm like, I told you to delete it, like just delete it. Don't just sit there for like 70 days taking up storage. But it is what it is. We are now filming again, and I'm just gonna go through the two books that I really still need to read this month. As far as audiobooks go, I don't have anything else planned. I'm just gonna kind of read whatever, which is what I often do with audiobooks. But as far as my TBR goes, I have only one book left on that, and that is Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World. I decided to wait on picking this up until after the readathon since it is a little bit over 500 pages, so not the kind of book you really read during a readathon because it's kind of long. But yes, this is the last book on my TBR game, and I will be picking that up next week as soon as I finish this readathon, and it will be done, and this duology will be done. And then the other book I have is my punishment prompt from April, and that is The Confessions of a Young Nero. And this is, I believe, a book that's from my Self-Destruct series, which is ending here in July. So I definitely want to see about getting to it this month. All right, guys, so these are the 4 physical books that I was able to finish, and then I had a 9 or so audiobooks that I completed as well. Let me know down below what you have been reading so far this month and what your favorite has been. Mine has obviously been Everything I Never Told You. But as always, guys, thank you so much for supporting my channel by watching my videos, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!